Alright, in this video we're going to talk about how to solve quadratic equations by taking square roots. Really just simple quadratic equations. Okay, so our essential question, how can you solve a quadratic equation algebraically using square roots? Alright, here's a few things that we're going to look for. Alright, when we do this, we're going to look for no middle term. That's going to be the first set of examples we're going to look at. When I say no middle term, in a typical standard form, we have this. Right. However, we're looking for something that doesn't have that. So our simple quadratic form is going to look just like this. Okay. Where we have ax squared plus c equals 0. There's no middle term. And let's just see a few examples about what that's going to look like. All right, example number 1. First thing we got to do, just think about first solving for that x squared. Right? Just like with any solving problem, let's get this x by itself, this isolation, okay? So when we do that, what we're going to do is add this 5 over, okay, add that 5. So we're left with 4x squared equals 7, all right? 4x squared equals 7. Now, something else we can do is, well, the x squared isn't by itself yet, so let's divide by 4. Right? Opposite of multiplication is dividing by 4. So right here we have x squared equals 7 over 4. And let's just leave that as a fraction. There's really no need to do that as a decimal yet because at the end we can put everything in our calculator anyway. All right. So if we think about squaring as multiplying something by itself, well, the opposite of that would be square rooting something. So if we wanted to undo this x squared, all we got to do is just square root. But remember, when you do something on one side in algebra, you always have to do the same thing on the other side. So if I square root the left side, square root the right side also. All right. So we have x equals that square root of 7 over 4. Now here's the tricky part. All right. The tricky part here is there's going to be two answers here, right? The reason we have two answers, let's just say, for example, we have square root of 4. All right, so the square root of 4. Well, the square root of 4 we know is 2, but it's not just positive 2, it's also negative 2. The reason it's negative 2 is because if we take negative 2 squared, we're still going to get a positive 4. Right? So there's two possibilities for us to get those two answers. All right, so what we make is a plus or minus square root of 7 over 4. That plus or minus just tells you there's a positive answer there and a negative part as well. Okay. Really all we have to do now is just separate these two. We know that there's a positive square root of 7 over 4 and a negative square root of 7 over 4. And really you can just put this into our calculator and we'll get an estimated answer of, so the first one, positive 1.32 and a negative 1.32. That's our approximated answer. Now, if you were to just take a look at, all right, well, what's our exact answer, meaning no decimals? The exact answer. If we take this 7 over 4, well, we can take the square root of 4, right? So the square root of 4 is 2, so we can just simplify the bottom and leave the top as a radical. All right, so we have 7 over 2, and then we also have negative 7, square root of 7 over 2, right? Which if you're to double check with your calculator, this and this, those two are equivalent. Same thing with the positive answer as well. All right, let's move on to the next example. All right, example 2, 9x squared plus 20 equals 60. First step, as always, subtract 20. So we have 9x squared equals 60 minus 20 is 40. And then we can divide by 9. Divide by 9. So we're left with x squared equals 40 over 9. And so we can't simplify this 40 over 9. So what we're going to do is the same as example 1. Square root. Just square root it. Okay. So we get x equals, now we know we can do plus or minus, right? So plus or minus square root of 40 over 9. All right, so approximated answers, meaning as a decimal, we're going to get two numbers. We have square root, our decimals are going to be 2.11 and negative 2.11 rounded. All right, there you go. Our exact answers. Exact answer. Well, this one's a little bit more thinking involved. Well, let's say, okay, can we take the square root of 40? Yes, but we have to factor it first. So let's factor it into 2 and 20. Okay, 2 and 20. Let's factor this 20 into 2 and 10, and then this 10 into 2 and 5. And that's all we can do there. All right, we have a pair of 2's and no other pairs. So this is going to factor into plus or minus. We have this pair of 2's right here, so that comes out. And then still inside the radical, we have 2 and 5 multiplied to get 10. Okay, so plus or minus 2 times the square root of 10, and on the bottom we have square root of 9. Square root of 9 is just 3. So there we go. That is our exact answer, where our approximate answers are right here. Okay, there we go. That's example 2. Now example 3 is a little bit different. So we're solving now when it looks a little bit different, right? So now we have parentheses. You don't need to distribute, right? A lot of times when you see parentheses, like, okay, I got to distribute, I got to do double distribution, but really that's not going to be the easiest thing here, because what we want to do is say, all right, well, this whole thing is still being squared. Well, how do we undo squaring something? Same thing, let's square root it. Okay, we're still going to square root. All right, so when we square root, this squared just goes away, right? We undo it. So x plus 5, and now equals 36, square root of 36. Well, the square root of 36 is 6, but whenever you take a square root, you always have to do plus or minus. There's those two answers there. All right, so this plus or minus really just means there's two separate equations, give you two different answers. All right, so we have x plus 5 equals 6, x plus 5 equals negative 6. Right, now it's a pretty easy one-step equation where x equals 6 minus 5 is 1. And then we have negative 6 minus 5 is negative 11. Okay, pretty straightforward there. Example 4. So now this is where it gets pretty fun, all right? And this is our last example as well, all right? So we can't take the square root just yet. I suppose we could. There's ways we can do that, but that's not going to be the easiest right off the bat. What we can do is, well, if we say we have 4, let's say we had 4y equals 24. Well, we would know right off the bat, well, the opposite of multiplying by 4 is just to divide by 4. All right, well, let's use that same concept here. Let's just divide this whole thing by 4, assuming this x plus 10 is just one group of things. So we're going to divide both sides by 4. When you divide by 4, that cancels that out. And now on the left-hand side, we have x plus 10 squared equals 24 divided by 4 is 6. All right, now we're back to something pretty familiar. We can undo this square by taking the square root on both sides. Okay, so we now have x plus 10 equals plus or minus square root of 6, right? Still plus or minus. All right, still fun. This is the fun part. Now we can subtract 10 on both sides. Actually, let's do something first. Let's split this up into two separate equations. We have x plus 10 equals the positive square root of 6. And then we have x plus 10 equals the negative square root of 6. This plus or minus, again, means there's a positive square root of 6 and a negative square root of 6. All right, what we can do now is we can subtract 10. And there we have x equals square root of 6 minus 10. All right, that's an exact answer. That exact answer, for some maybe on a test, it might say give an exact answer. Well, this is what you would give right here. Okay. However, if you were to put it in a calculator just like this, you would get an answer of negative 7.55. Okay, rounded to 2 decimal places. All right, we can do the same thing over here, and we get x equals negative square root of 6 minus 10. All right, again, that's our exact answer, but if we wanted an approximate answer where we have to round, we get negative 12.45. All right, cool. So now you might notice, well, these two answers are negative. I thought we were supposed to have a plus or minus. Well, that plus or minus really is just kind of an in-between step. You still have to do some work after that. So you could end up with a negative and a negative, such as in this case right here. All right, so that was solving by solving by square roots. Just another method, different than factoring, to solve quadratic equations. Okay, there we go.